Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our February Lunch and Learn. I am Amanda Lakin with the Nevada Housing Coalition. And if you are new here, I saw some new names sign up for the session today. I just want to say welcome. We are going to be recording this session and sharing out a link to the recording and slides later this week. And just a couple of announcements. We are very excited to announce a new series that we're starting called Housing Insights. This is just going to be a spinoff of our Lunch and Learns. We are going to host them quarterly via Zoom. So please save the date for Tuesday, March 24th at 10 a.m. We are going to be welcoming Emily Kadick with the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Coalition and Joshua Urich from Midwest Housing Equity Group. They're going to be giving a discussion about the housing landscape both nationally and across Nevada. This will include federal tax landscape, how the state tax credit conversation is playing out in other states, along with some information on compliance and budget. So please keep an eye out for that. We will be launching a registration link for that soon. And for our members, just a reminder that next Tuesday at 3 o'clock, we are hosting our Southern Nevada Town Hall at Nevada Partners. And our summer policy forums are coming up in mid-July. So again, stay tuned. We're really close to finalizing dates and locations for both Northern and Southern Nevada. And last but not least, our 2026 Nevada Housing Conference is coming up on September 23rd and 24th in Reno. Our conference planning committee has already started planning, so we should have a theme and some additional announcements to share with all of you very soon. So now, on to today's session. Last August, we welcomed the Nevada Housing Division to discuss AB 540, the Nevada Housing Access and Attainability Act. They shared the background on the bill, some key provisions. They shared the formation of the Attainable Housing Council and provided an overview of the Nevada Attainable Housing Fund, including the initial allocation plan and next steps. If you missed that session, it was one of our most highly attended Lunch and Learns. We did record it, and I will share the link to that as well this week, but we are welcoming them back 6 months later to share an update. So I would like to introduce Steve Aichroth, Nevada Housing Division's Administrator, and Christine Hess, their CFO. Welcome you all.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you to the coalition, Maurice and Amanda, plus everyone on this webinar. We certainly appreciate your attention to housing in Nevada, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully you can all see the presentation on the slideshow. And Christine, if you want to advance it to the next one. There we go. And Amanda kind of gave an overview, but I think it still kind of bears repeating a little bit to go over exactly what AB 540, how it came to be and what it spawned and what it looks like. And that's the Nevada Housing Access and Attainability Act. It's important to know that work on this actually began well in advance of the legislative session. Even over a year and a half, probably 2 years ago, with a working group of about 15 to 20 stakeholders throughout the housing ecosystem in Nevada. And the directive was really to create attainable supply, addressing housing needs across all income spectrums, not just the lowest strata, but also to extend opportunities for moderate income Nevadans to obtain homeownership opportunities. And as it worked through the legislative process, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that two bills were sort of created off of those discussions. One was the creation of AB 475, which provided eviction diversion funds to local jurisdictions in Nevada to support statewide housing stability for renters. The second was the creation of AB 366. And again, that was a $21 million addition to the Supportive Housing Development Fund and creating the fund's permanence in the state budget. So as we were talking through this and developing it, that left basically $133 million in the Attainable Housing Fund. And you're going to hear how we have awarded some of that shortly. At this point, I would be really remiss not to acknowledge the support of both the governor's office and the legislature, along with the stakeholder community, which most of you are involved in, and our own division team in creating and refining the bill. There was huge momentum to provide a workable bill for the benefit of Nevadans. And this bill has resulted in the single largest investment of state dollars for the benefit of housing in the state's history. And the emphasis there, ultimately, the bill passed the assembly 42-0. That doesn't happen every day. So speaking on behalf of the division, we are extremely aware of the trust and responsibility that elected officials have provided to the divisions. And what you're going to hear today is how we are affecting the responsibility that was given to the division. Ultimately, you will hear that this will result in over $1 billion in other funds, primarily private financing and private equity, being provided to projects. So on slide 2 here, when we look at the key provisions, go back one, Christine. There you go. Mentioning the $133 million investment, the establishment of the 7-person Attainable Housing Council that Amanda alluded to a little earlier. It also changed the definition of affordable housing. Now everything is attainable housing, but there are 5 levels of affordable housing within those definitions, and the income tiers are listed there on the slide. It also required local jurisdictions to expedite and incentivize attainable housing projects, enabled contractor licensing reciprocity in communities with populations of less than 100,000, and then also created the Nevada Attainable Housing Infrastructure Fund, which will be funded with the issuance of up to $50 million in general obligation bonds to support developments in special improvement and special assessment districts. Now you can go ahead, Christine. So the Attainable Council, statutorily formed with the members listed there and who appointed those members. And then to the right, you can see who ultimately serves on this council. And the council has the responsibility of overseeing the division and making sure that we're adhering to the spirit of what was passed, and then also reviewing the awarding of the projects as we work through the process. Next slide. So the $133 million is statutorily identified in the initial allocation as is displayed on this slide. So $83 million of the 133 is for the development of attainable housing and the development of affordable housing, including land acquisition. 25 million was provided to assist essential workers in purchasing homes, including potentially down payment assistance, interest rate buydowns, or any other form of financial support for the purchase of homes. And then there was a local government matching fund. 25 million is going to be provided to local governments as matching funds for incentives to reimburse for waiving and deferring the payment of fees and taxes for attainable housing projects. Now, in the development opportunities and the local government matching funds, you're going to hear a little bit about the awards. However, we need to execute some agreements with some folks, and that's what the division is currently working on as we develop this. The home ownership opportunities, because of the way that it was phrased, allowed us to actually begin to put funding out the door. And so if we go to the next slide, 18 million was provided to the Nevada Housing Division, and 4 million was provided to the Nevada Rural Housing Authority. And we're both running programs for essential workers. And you can see between the two programs, we have provided loans to over 200 households. You'll see some statistics there about the average purchase price. This money is it's going fast. I will say that. We've had great success in this program. We anticipate great success. We do have complementary programs, both us and Nevada Rural Housing, should folks not be qualified for the Worker Advantage program. But I think it's fair to say we'll probably be exhausted of this funding, at least from the division side, sometime this spring. So as we move forward, we know we're providing opportunities for folks to obtain home ownership that previously probably didn't have the opportunities to do so. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Christine, and she'll talk about what's coming next.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Amanda. So, and I just want to also just emphasize that the housing division doesn't actually provide mortgages, right? We're providing the down payment assistance in this case, or interest rate buy downs. So this is a public-private partnership. We are working with our private lender community for all of these loans, and same with Nevada Rural Housing. And that's really a common theme that you'll hear throughout, right? Is public-private partnership and the leveraging of other funds, other financing, investor equity. It's really just been an exciting project, and kind of even for the housing division, taking the work that we do one more step. So I am hopefully going to be able to run our slides. Yes, and present. We'll see. Hopefully I don't get caught up. So we're not going to get into the specifics of the projects we funded, but I know our partner Amanda is going to be dropping a link into the recommendations that were provided to the Attainable Council on February 5th. And ultimately approved by them, and thus approved by the division to move ahead with the awards. But I am going to share some insights as we go through here, and happy to take questions, as Amanda noted in the chat. So there was a lot of interest for this program, which was super amazing, especially after all the hard work and all the energy that went into it throughout the legislative session. The total program you can see here was oversubscribed by 1.5 times, but in particular, the development opportunity category was oversubscribed 1.8 times. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looked like. So of the 111 million, so that was the 133 million minus the 22 million of Nevada Rural Housing and Housing Division homeownership programs. So of the 111 million, we had 166 million in requests across all 3 categories. We had 43 applications submitted. Thus, Christine's very aggressive timeline for reviewing applications got pushed a little bit. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. And we ended up working through the applications, and ultimately the division recommended 19 projects or subrecipients for awards, with a total of 64 million recommended for awards. And this will be important as you hear, because when we get to the end of this presentation and discuss next steps, if you're all doing the quick math, like I know you all are, we have 46 million remaining. And so that'll be of interest to everybody here, I'm sure. So I'm going to, again, in the chat, you'll see a link to more details about the projects that were selected for awards, but I'm going to kind of, again, high level, and really what I see, and the kind of the standout data that came forward for the division as we went through things. I also want to describe the process. So we had a pre-application process that had, I think, about 53 pre-applications that came in across all 4 categories. I think we had 7 that we ended up denying for various reasons. They didn't meet pre-application thresholds, and we had another 3 that self-selected and didn't move into the application phase. So again, as you saw from the previous slide, we had 43 applicants. And what we did was we established a scoring committee, which included the housing division, internal team members, and an external third party The Housing Division's multifamily financial advisor, who also has partners and resources in her consulting group. The three of us went in and we looked at the applications and we scored them according to the criteria in the allocation plan. After we reached preliminary scores, those were shared with the applicants along with some follow-up questions, and the applicants had 5 days to respond and cure their application. A couple people got a couple extra days because of the Microsoft Outlook shortage that happened across the country, but not generally speaking. Overall, everybody had a chance to respond, and we even reached out specifically to those that we didn't get a response to make sure that they didn't have a response for us. After that, the scoring committee went back, looked at the follow-up, the answers, took a look at the scoring, made any revisions that we thought were applicable or needed, and forwarded those scores on to division leadership. At that point, division leadership reviewed, again, across all of these categories, and ultimately made this recommendation of 12 projects in these 4 subcategories. So land acquisition, multifamily rental, low-income housing tax credits, multifamily rental that are not low-income housing tax credit projects, and then single family, duplex, tris, quads, for sale. They also could have been for rent. In this case, all of the awards went to for sale projects. You can see there the number of homes that were created and supported in the development opportunities as proposed by these awardees. And you can also see the amounts awarded. We referenced, and in the chat, you'll see a link to the allocation plan. So the distribution was not just 83 million for development, but we further defined it in the allocation plan, which you could also consider program guidance, into 4 different areas. And in land acquisition, it was 23 million was what we made available. Multifamily rental LIHTC, we made available 15 million. Multifamily rental, not LIHTC, not low-income housing tax credit projects, we made available to 15 million. And then also in the single family space, we made available 30 million. So again, totaling 83 million, and our recommendation and ultimately our awards were $51.8 million. A couple of things to note. You can see there, Southern and Northern Nevada, the division of funds of awards, at least that went out. But I just kind of want to highlight a couple of the other areas that I thought were interesting. In the land bucket, if you will. So first of all, these projects need to pay the funds back within 2 years. So let me actually pause there. Of the 64 million, and actually I can include really the 22 million that's being administered for home ownership, of those funds, only, well, actually, let me speak to development opportunities because home ownership looks a little different. Of the $51.8 million that you see here, only $3 million is going out as grants. The other $48 million is being deployed in some way, shape, or form as a loan. Subordinate loan, participation loan, some collateral going against the project. Those funds are expected, not just expected, but that was actually a criteria of the application that those funds return to the state so that we can redeploy them. So we've created a revolving loan fund with the Nevada Attainable Housing Account. For the land subcategory of funding, we required a repayment in 2 years with an option that it could be extended up to a maximum of 3 times. In the multifamily rental, we did acknowledge that that may or may not work. And in the scoring criteria, you'll see that if they return in 4 years, that's also incentivized. And same in multifamily rental and same with single family. So we did kind of set some scoring criteria that really tried to hone in on 2 and 4 years as kind of milestones for repayment across the development opportunities bucket of funds, the category of funds. So in the applications, this held pretty true. Really, the only place where it's a little different is in the multifamily rental LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit. I want to say here, so in the land acquisition, let me go back, 3 projects. We had 6 applications. All 6 were from Clark County, and all 6 were low-income housing tax credit projects. I thought that was really interesting because we all hear how land is a challenge, but the only land applications we got were from low-income housing tax credit developers. That also speaks to, though, the relationships that the housing division has with our low-income housing tax credit community. They know how to work with us. We are doing deals constantly for affordable housing, whether it's in the 9%, 4% bonds, just all over the place, and now in this attainable housing account. So while not totally surprising, I was surprised that there were no projects from the north and there were no projects that were not low-income housing tax credit. In the multifamily rental space, the 15 million. So I just want to share with you all, especially for our advocates here, we have a very, very robust pipeline of affordable low-income housing tax credit projects coming forward. And there are a lot of gaps in financing. In fact, the request for multifamily rentals and low-income housing tax credits, $74 million. So that's, when I looked at that category on its own, I said, holy smokes, we have 14 projects. That was the number in this category. And there's $74 million in gap that we'll need to figure out how to get closed, because as we all know, with the shortage of affordable housing supply in Nevada, so again, below 60% of area median income, we need all the housing we can get, right? We're still one of the states with the worst shortage. So that was jaw-dropping and one of the things that stood out to me as I looked at this. And again, the reason we only designated 15 million was because we could have put 83 million and just put it up for grabs. Our low-income housing tax credit community would have taken it all because they know how to work with us. We run programs. We just deployed 500 million and are doing that successfully with our partners, building the housing. So it's certainly a great place to do the work, but we wanted to honor the work of the task force and make sure that we spread funding across the attainable housing spectrum. So that's new for the division, but going up to 150% area median income and also including some for sale housing. In the multifamily rentals, that's where you'll see that 2.979 million. Those are both grant funds. Two projects that have some other state and federal grant funds, one in the north, one in the south, and they are supportive housing projects. Those were really the only types of projects in the allocation plan that were allowed grant funds. So I do want to kind of speak to that because in both the multifamily rental and in this area, we had a couple other applications that, because the housing division administers multiple sources of funds, it was an opportunity for us to pick up the phone and say, your application is strong. It looks like you're ready to go, but it doesn't really meet the attainable housing account. It looks like you're putting in a bond application, for example. Are you considering the other resources because those make more sense? And so working with some of those other projects that scored really high, were project ready, we were actually able to fund or will be funding 4 other projects that did not get attainable housing account funds. So again, kind of you see the bonus and the benefit of the housing division having a tight team that's working on housing development across this spectrum. So in the single family space, this one was really interesting, very new. I like to share this story because I think it's awesome. This is where we have the private sector builders and developers coming in that don't usually work with us. And in our application, for those of you who work with public partners and public funding often, in our application, it said, please expand on your narrative. And we had one single family developer, they literally put one sentence. So when we sent it back with their preliminary scores, we said, and they said, why did we score so low? We thought we really matched the task forces. As we read the AB 540, listened to the legislative testimony, it seemed like it matched. And I'm like, well, most people put more than one sentence when it says expand your narrative. And the applicant said, oh, so kind of like a college project. And I said, yes, welcome to the public funding world. So they then revised and submitted a more expanded narrative. But it just was really, I think, an opportunity for the division to meet our private partners where they are, assist them, provide the technical assistance to help them put their best foot forward. We did not fund every application in this bucket of funds. So we funded 5. And let's see, I can give you some of the highlights from this one. We had 8 applicants total. Again, the 5 that we funded are all for sale homes. They are definitely private sector partners. The repayment terms that we saw in the applications are essentially between 2 and 4 years. The highest scoring application was a project called Formation Homes by Stitzer Built. It was a scattered site project up here in the north, and it spans Sun Valley, Golden Valley, and Fernley for those of you that are in northern Nevada. Again, you'll see this project listed if you go to the recommendations. So really some exciting projects. Paradise Trails, another applicant here. That one is different. You're going to hear me speak in ways that are not as certain as we typically are in the multifamily space because this is new for us. In the case of Paradise Trails, they're a little different than the others. The other 4 applicants are the funding requests really support the construction, where in this case with Paradise Trails, we'll be supporting the attainability of the new supply. So, but for the Attainable Housing Account, households at 150% of area median income, so meeting the attainable housing criteria, may not be able to get into these homes. And so, again, working with the division team internally, because this is a space where we do work, we're working through that process. But I really kind of consider this bucket of funds right now kind of pilot, right? It's a learning experience for all of us, getting to know each other, getting to know our councils as we work through agreements, and how the funding expectations work. So that is the development side. Another thing I want to point out. Oh, and
Christine, I just want
yes,
to add something and give you a chance to take a
breathe.
sip of water.
Thank you.
And Christine has talked about it a little bit. There are very few state HFAs, and effectively that's what the Nevada Housing Division is, that have previously engaged in this. There's maybe a handful on a large scale to this point of working with private sector partners in developing single family, whether they're duplex, triplex, condos, townhomes, in that space. But it's a space that we know has been sort of historically underserved, especially over the past few years. So as Christine has alluded to, new for the division, new for the pilot. I know we're going to talk a little bit later about next steps in 26. This is probably an area that we'll need to refine a little bit more as we were collecting applications and that sort of thing, and to take a look at, and not to jump ahead, but there will be a public process that will be involved in that. But it's really something that we're pretty darn excited about, because it's a space that we really haven't played in before. And to provide the opportunities and increase the supply of these attainable homes really was one of the major focuses of the task force, of the governor's office, of the legislature, and I think that's reflected in the award amounts that you see displayed on your screen. So I just wanted to chime in with that. Thank you, Christine.
Yeah, no, thanks, Steve. And here too, what was really amazing, right, is the state is not fully funding any of these projects, right? And I think that's really important. What you'll see is, as Steve mentioned, we are a housing finance agency. So really your state bank for funding housing development. We do a lot of other housing things, but let's just put it that way when it comes to housing finance agency. And as you can see here on the screen, the average leverage ratio in this development category was 11.5 times, right? So for every dollar invested by the state, there's $11.50 of other funding coming to the table. And that's really huge, right? That's why we're projecting, not with just this first 64 million or 64 plus 22, 87 million, however much that we've put out the door. Can't do math on the fly, but these first funds that have been deployed, but overall with the 133 million, there will be over $1 billion of private funding, well over $1 billion of private funding that's leveraged. And then imagine we're going to return most of these funds to the state to redeploy. So pretty exciting. I'm going to stop there and move to the next slide. Homeownership opportunities. So this was also interesting. We had 4 projects apply, 4 strong applications. In fact, they all scored very well, and they all scored very similar to each other. We had 3 that were from Southern Nevada and 1 from the rural, and I saw some of our partners here in the chat and in the participant list. So nobody from the north applied, right? I thought that was kind of interesting. This category was split evenly, the 3 million, among the 4 participants, and they'll be utilizing the funds as we typically see in the home buyer assistance space through down payment assistance, closing costs, reimbursements, interest rate buy downs, one of those or some combination thereof. The maximum assistance per program varied, but it went from $20,000 to $40,000 per home buyer. So again, interesting. This is more familiar space for the division, and awardees, yes, your agreements will be coming. So we are working on those now. Lastly, let's get to the local government matching funds. And I saw a lot of my local government partners here, which, by the way, I do want to set a meeting with you all. So if one of you wants to take the lead and make that happen, that would be lovely. I haven't had a chance to do that. But I think this, to me, we discussed in the development opportunities bucket of funds, the opportunity for the division to be creative, highest and best use of funds across all of our funding resources, right? We were able to do that and take 4 projects off the table. They wouldn't have received funds from NAHA anyway, from the Attainable account anyway, but still move them and get them across the finish line through various other resources. In this case, the opportunity is I could have asked better application questions and provided better program guidance. This is the first time we've done this type of reimbursement match program. So the idea here is, if you'll all recall, in the 2019 session, Senate Bill 103 was passed, which allowed for the waiving of fees and taxes to incentivize affordable housing. Fast forward to 2025 session, we know, especially with the city of Reno and the lead, Clark County, city of Las Vegas, not far behind, that communities, as they took advantage of this, it was costing them a lot, and they can't go forward and continue incentivizing the projects at a local level without some help. And so that really was the genesis of these matching funds. And so the task force and the testimony really was, well, when the local government is potentially tapping their sewer fees, right, which impact their enterprise funds, they can come to the division, and if they waived $500,000 in sewer fees, they can request $250,000. So very successful. I say a lot of interest. Here we had, I think, 6 or 8 applicants. I don't have it on my notes. And we ended up funding 4. That said, everybody else is going to get funding. It was really just a lot of my coming to the table to listen how they were describing when they thought a cost was incurred, right? Which for the housing division, I would not consider, for example, approval to waive a fee for a project as a cost incurred. Because I have seen at the housing division where projects that had approval for a fee waiver didn't actually end up happening, right? So for me, there is a different place. And in some cases, it was maybe a certificate of occupancy that proved that. Another really creative way that I think we'll see a lot of our local governments tap going forward, but this is true, it's an incentive that, but for our tax abatements that are allowed for properties that align with the federal IRS code section 42. So basically low-income housing tax credit, federal low-income housing tax credit projects. but for the ability to have an abated property tax or an exemption from paying their property taxes, they wouldn't move forward. They just don't pencil. And so we did have one local government that worked with their assessor and put together the amount that they waived in fiscal year 25 in this case, and they were able to receive their reimbursement. So it was a good learning experience also for me, especially because I work directly with the applicants to understand how we can provide better guidance. And I just want to assure the local jurisdictions. So this pot of funds, this 25 million, was not competitive. We assigned every jurisdiction their own amount of money based on population. It's in the allocation plan, and they will still have that money. So if you didn't put in an application because you didn't understand or you didn't realize that we were able to deploy these funds so quickly, don't worry, your money's still there and you can still access it. In fact, we say for at least up to 9 months after October. So at least through this next allocation round, but even longer if necessary. We want to give every community the ability to access these funds if they are trying to incentivize attainable housing in their communities. So give them time to pass ordinances, for example, and do all the work necessary to get these funds. Now, what doesn't qualify is it does have to be funding from the local government. You can't use your federal funds as the matching fund. So there's some nuances. We'll get together local government partners to figure that out. And as Steve said, there'll be a public workshop. So if it's not in statute and it's something that we can adjust in program guidance, that's really where we're going to take a look at that. So here you can see in February, we presented our recommendations to the council, approved that. We're currently in the process of doing the agreements. I anticipate end of March, beginning of April, we'll release the 2026 allocation plan, which is the program guidance. And that will be going for a public workshop. So in fact, Amanda, if you can drop in the chat too, in order to get the notices, you can sign up for the state, but you can also sign up for our listservs. And our listservs will also provide the communication about the public workshop and the draft allocation plan. I anticipate adopting the 2026 plan. So again, for the 46 million, which by the way, 16 million of that is for the local governments, right? So there's 30 million left for the other eligible activities of AB 540. We'll adopt that May, June, open the applications, and then again around September, we'll be recommending the awards to the Nevada Attainable Housing Council, and then following up with awards in September for the 2026 plan. I'd be surprised if we have any funds left because it was so popular and oversubscribed on the initial round. So I think we are done. And you're all
Well,
done.
and I know Amanda has put in a number of links into the chat where there's a number of resources, but I also want to emphasize that you can go to the division's website, which is housing.nv.gov. There's a program tab. The first listing on the program tab is attainable housing, and you can go there and there's more information, and we'll continue to populate this part of the website as we develop more things to put in there. So yeah, thank you, Christine. Thank you, Amanda. And I know that there's a couple of things in the Q&A. I haven't looked at them, but I see at least two things.
Yeah, I just looked at them. So let's address the first one. How do the 1,566 homes that will be built from the development opportunities category address the housing shortage per AB 213? So I would say right here standing in front of you all right now for this presentation, I'm not going to link it directly to AB 213. However, we can make it per community. I guess that's what I would do, is start to look at what the communities are and go into the supply shortage. But essentially, we are addressing the housing supply shortage across the state. What was again also disappointing, and we'll be having this follow-up conversation. In fact, we're heading out to Elko in 6 weeks or so for a meeting and get together, is the lack of rural participation for the development opportunities. And there was some pre-application conversation, some pre-applications not submitted. Again, with it being a pilot program, these are not funds for startups, right? So if you don't have experience and you have an idea, this isn't going to be your program. It doesn't mean there isn't something out there. It doesn't, and I would definitely recommend working with the Housing Coalition and their education opportunities. And it doesn't mean that you can't partner with a more experienced developer or builder for your first project. But in the rurals, we didn't have any applications that came through for the final application, other than the one kind of scattered site and a couple other in Fernley. I guess, obviously, Fernley's not Washoe or Clark, but it's so borderline to Reno and a lot of adjacent housing and shared workforce. So that's the first question. Hopefully I answered that.
And if you don't mind, I'll tag on to that a little
Yep.
bit. Christine, we've all, those of us who have been around for a while, have realized there is no magic single bullet for this. And when I say this, it's our housing affordability issues. And so everything that the division does, and we've allocated over $1 billion in resources post-pandemic, and are working through all those processes. Effectively, really, we have to work around the edges, I guess is the best way to phrase that. So, and that's kind of true of everything. And you see it on the federal level, you see it on the local jurisdiction level, and certainly you see it on the state level. We've made some huge investments on the state level. We know that there have been local jurisdictions that have made huge investments on their level. Clark County Community Housing Fund, as an example. And so when you start to see these things and you start to see them, snowball, for lack of a better word, then you will start to see some impact to address the housing shortage. And Lord knows, we do have a housing shortage that is really based on supply, and that is, or lack of supply, technically. And that's what we're trying to address here. So, sorry, just needed to get that in there, Christine.
No, thank you. And yes, the essential workers conversation, especially relative to the homeownership programs. So in Assembly Bill 540, you'll see in the earlier part of the bill, I'd like to say section 7, 9, somewhere in there. The bill does allow for eligible activities for home buyer assistance broadly. However, in section 50, when the allocation plan, the initial allocation plan came out from the legislature and in the bill, it only allowed for the initial home ownership programs to go to essential workers. And further, the essential workers were defined in Assembly Bill 540. So it's probably confusing because during COVID, the pandemic, essential workers had a slightly different meaning than it does in Assembly Bill 540, but that is a definition in statute. What you will see is that any homeownership programs that are supported going forward won't necessarily have that essential worker requirement. That said, as Steve mentioned, the Housing Division's homebuyer program for essential workers, we won't lift that. It's going crazy, and we're definitely going to exhaust those funds soon. And we feel good that we are supporting workers across the spectrum, right? Because we have complementary homebuyer assistance programs through the division, as does Nevada Rural Housing. Steve, did you want to add anything to that question around essential workers?
No, I think you got it.
What's another power that a local government can cite as an incentive? Oh.
So I think in looking at this one, I think we just kind of need to circle back to what Christine alluded to previously, which was we need to sit down with you folks, local government folks, maybe have a separate meeting in regards to what is going to work. Give us some prime examples of what you think you've done and how that looks and how we can dovetail it into the definitions that are applied for in AB 540. And I think that's the best answer I can tell you. We just need to have more discussions. That money, as Christine has indicated, is not going away. We understand time is money, and you'd like your money faster if you're a local jurisdiction or to be reimbursed for your activities. We certainly appreciate them, but we need to get our arms around just a little bit better.
Yeah, and I will say, local governments, you're really challenging us. Anybody who's worked with the housing division, we want to help you make your projects happen. Good projects need to happen. And in the case of local governments, we know you are doing the good work, right? C, I love C. Taking any other action within the authority of the local government that increases the supply of attainable housing. I can sit here and tell you what I think that means, but really I think you're coming to me and you're telling me what that looks like and what your costs have been to do that. And then we take a look at that and see what you're eligible for in terms of reimbursement. So look, we answered every question. Nobody has any questions.
We just had 2 more come in.
Oh, geez.
Do you want me to read them for you? Does the deletion of sections 13, 21, and 27 of AB 540 make prevailing wage applicable to the 4 awarded projects?
So we have, I think, 19 awards that we gave overall for the attainable account. But NRS 338 does not apply to residential construction.
Right. And then it looks like, is there a requirement for a deed restriction on the units triggered when a private developer applicant accepts money from the new state housing funds?
So we are currently getting into the agreement phase, and this is where we'll get into negotiations. And I think this is a strength of the housing division, and you could probably have everybody here in the chat back me up on this. But we really come to the table and work with each project individually to protect the public funds, maintain compliance with our federal requirements, in this case also state requirements, and get projects across the finish line. So in terms of a deed restrictions on any of the units, when I think of the development units, the low-income housing tax credit projects, those are going to have compliance period of 30 years, right? Rentals. In fact, I will say we had 4 applications in the multifamily rental space. I'm not very excited to award projects that don't have compliance experience, right? Because to say you'll be compliant for even 10 years, that means you're delivering rent rolls, you're verifying incomes for renters, and multifamily compliance is complicated. Regarding the for sale homes, the biggest criteria we're looking at is that the household income is below 150% AMI. If there's some reason where the home is, if there's a deed restriction necessary based on the project that's described, you'll see the housing division require a deed restriction. So again, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, is how I would add. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, and as I mentioned previously, there are a number of other states playing in this space. We're all approaching it almost exclusively as pilot programs because this is sort of new and fresh. And there are states that require deed restrictions 100% across the board, and there are states that don't require deed restrictions 100% across the board. And the feeling with the latter group is that if you're going to build homes at, and this varies across the country, but 250,000, which we can't even build in Nevada for 250,000, but maybe they can do that in New Mexico or Oklahoma. Then that will be sort of quote unquote natural occurring affordable housing. It's always going to be a 1,200 square foot home that's going to sell for significantly less than a 2,000 square foot home or a 2,500 square foot home. So we've kind of looked at all of those options and basically sort of landed on, okay, let's allow some flexibility and see what this looks like, because they are pilots and we need to know what is successful, what the builders can build, and still have for some sustainability. So as Christine mentioned, effectively, I don't want to say we punted, because we didn't. We were more allowing the flexibility depending on what the situation looks like.
Awesome. Thank you both. I think those were all the questions that came in so far. So it sounds like next steps, there will be an announcement about public workshops. We will send out all of the links that were shared. You can sign up for the divisions listserv. If you're attending today, you're also on our email list, so we will keep you in the loop. And yes, thank you all for attending. Looking forward to our next Lunch and Learn at the end of March, our Housing Insights. And if you are a Southern Nevada resident and a member of the coalition, please attend our Southern Nevada Town Hall next Tuesday. And wishing you all a great afternoon. Thank you, everyone.